Well, after Kirk and crew saved Spock, literally bringing him back from death, they were living in exile on Vulcan. And the opening of the fourth Star Trek film, Voyage Home, states this, that they had been, I think, 3 months living on Vulcan. I suppose they could have pled for asylum there, but in the end they decided they needed to go back home and face whatever consequences they would have to as a result of crimes they had committed. So the fourth film, in my opinion, brings to a close the Genesis trilogy, as I like to call it, as the main sci-fi concept out of it, because the Wrath of Khan is about the revenge of Khan and Kirk dealing with aging and all that sort of stuff. But the Genesis project was always in the background there of where this would go. And so as after Khan's attack, then you had the interest in this device after it's demonstrated in creating a planet out of the materials of a nebula. At the end of it caught the Klingons' notice, and they saw it as a weapon, which, to be fair, it could be used in that method. You could attack an enemy's planet and completely change it into a new planet, wiping out everything that was there before. So, but the property and real estate's still really good. You can mold it to whatever you wish. So they had some reason to feel threatened and what have you. So, of course, that's what went on in Search for Spock, not just the rescue of Spock, but in the rescue of Spock, they committed crimes. They stole the Enterprise, they attacked Federation officers, and disobeyed orders. So, despite the heroic efforts that they did, and thwarting the Klingons from getting a hold of the Genesis device, and of course, saving Spock, they had committed these crimes and would have to face them, and they all agreed they would go. Spock opts to go with them as well, as he's on his way to restore himself. He's still not quite there. He's still a little confused, and it puts him in this position that he's having to relearn his relationship with humans. Clearly, he had already done this through the show, and then even after motion picture, where he was trying to get to be pure Vulcan in that one and didn't quite get there, and decided ultimately his path lay elsewhere. And then when you get to Wrath of Khan, he's pretty much satisfied with who he is and everything. It's Kirk that's the one that's troubled in that one. But then he dies, and then he's resurrected. And he's like someone who suffered a severe head injury or something, was in a coma for a while, and they got to relearn how to talk and stuff like that. That's kind of the situation that Spock's in here. But of course, he's Spock, and he's got a super brain, and they're completely dependent on it in this episode. Episode. You can look at it as that. It's a film series. And despite all the odds against them, this opportunity, which changes everything, for them to save everybody. So the foundational plot here is that this alien probe shows up, and as its means of communication and sending out its signal, acts almost like an EMP, basically, to all Federation stations and starships, and several ships are just disabled. Their power is gone, and they're just drifting in space and all that stuff. And so finally, when it reaches the Earth, it knocks out their main space station, and then starts ionizing the atmosphere of the Earth, and it's causing all kinds of destruction, and they're losing power. They send out a distress signal that don't come to Earth, it's too dangerous and all that, right when Kirk and crew are heading back in their captured Klingon vessel. So they see the situation like, damn it, I just can't catch a break. So, of course, calling back to the TV series once again, they knew how to travel through time, and the reason they have to is that they discover that the signal from the alien probe is not seeking communication with humans, it's seeking communication with whales. So the whale song traveled out into the distant stars and made it all the way to this other alien civilization, and they no longer get it, and they're wondering why, so they send a probe to find out, apparently. And that's only speculation. It's never really shown exactly what the whole motivation was, other than they did want to communicate with them. And but of course, the whales are extinct by the time the 23rd century is around, so they have to go back in time and get them. And it's all good. The goal and the plot points are all very good. And this one is a bit of a departure from the other two. And the other two, I mean, within this Genesis storyline. Motion picture is kind of off by itself. In this one, that they decided to go more lighthearted. So there's a lot of comedy in it and that sort of thing. But it's not so over the top that it takes you out of the movie. There's some silliness with Spock misunderstanding things and that sort of stuff, but it's all credible and within the context of him recovering from what happened to him. And so there's back and forth there with him and McCoy, of course, and then with him and Kirk trying to explain things to him and all that. And it all works, and it's all good. It's just not as dramatic as the other two, which were all rather dark. This one, not so much, even though the stakes are very high. And then it's, obviously the message about, gee, we shouldn't be hunting animals to extinction and all that sort of stuff is there as well. So it's a perfectly good, heartwarming story. I think it's one of the ones that's a bit more beloved than most, even though, Khan remains the masterpiece. But a lot of people have a lot of fond thoughts about it because it's just a fun movie. And in a lot of ways, they could have just ended with this. It's kind of like a happy send-off for them. They had this one great adventure, and they saved the whole world and everything, and all of that. And they do. But it's interesting to parse it, especially I've talked about this, especially with the new shows and how I've stated over and over again, the only way those work is if they're alternate timelines and this sort of thing. There's been some theories about how First Contact with Next Generation changes time, and that kind of gives some subtle explanations for the Enterprise series and that sort of thing. Is that each time you travel through time, even no matter how careful you are, you're altering things. And such was the case here, and this is just this mission that they were forced to do just all of a sudden. So they're without all the backing of the Federation. They're in this stolen Klingon ship that they've managed to rewrite as computers to the best of their ability, but they don't really have access to everything they would need. So the odds are that they're going to protect the timeline is it's not good. And there's a scene where they flat out don't. And that's the one with McCoy and Scotty. Each one gets their missions. Sulu is off to find a helicopter. Uhura and Chekhov have to find a nuclear reactor because the dilithium crystals within the Klingon ship kind of burn out and all this sort of thing. And they got to get another fuel source to help, boost the ship so they can go back. Or forward, as it were. They needed basically the polymer siding to outfit the Klingon cargo hold to beam in the whales so they could transport them. And they were going to need to contain all the water and everything. So the 20th century technology is not quite up to snuff for the job, but so Scotty gives this guy the formula for how to develop a thin but yet very sturdy polymer siding that they can use. And McCoy, of course, hey, we're really messing with time here. And Scotty says, hey, how do we know he didn't invent it? Well, had they had the computers, I suspect they could research that. Is this the guy? What if it was? It is now, So things like that. And this is major. This isn't just, you bumped into somebody and he went in a different direction than he should have or something like that. This is full on. You gave this futuristic, molecular formula here to this guy, and his eyes are bulging out. He's astounded by what he's seeing and all that. And they just do it. So it's one of those things that if people would just make use of what's there to gird more of a foundation on their pursuits of new Star Trek, you could argue that yes, there's been a lot of changes. You would have to do a little more to explain how far it could be with this. It's not going to explain Spock having a sister and all that sort of stuff. But somewhat it could in some avenues, that things happen differently after this type of time travel shenanigans. But it's only so much. It's only so subtle that you could. But that definitely happens here. Where they do it, it's treated kind of like a silly joke, is the humorous nature or tone of the film. But still, it's like just flat out did it. And hey, did we ever check up on that guy? Nah, it's all right. And then, of course, they bring Jillian with them, but she says she has nobody, and when the whales were taken from her, she really had no other life but those whales and all that. So she goes to the future and turns out the only expert in whales, because no one studied them because they'd been extinct. So okay, that all fits out, but still, good Lord, just as history goes now, she mysteriously disappeared after slapping her boss and leaving, I guess. So, gee, I wonder what happened to her. I don't know. So that's that. It's a fun film. It doesn't quite have the power of the other two, but then it's not really intended to. And ultimately could have been a fairly decent send-off. As it goes, they're not in the normal flow as they were in the show. Most of them were near retirement or what have you. They're teaching cadets in Wrath of Khan, and they get caught up in this mission. Chekhov is off to another ship, but he gets captured by Khan and all that stuff. And then the next is all about saving Spock, and they do that, and then pretty much trash their careers. And then here at the end, because they're big heroes, they decide to assign them to a new ship. But at the end there, because they put their heads on the chopping block to save the Earth and everything from the probe, Kirk is the only one who gets punished by a demotion. He's no longer admiral, he's back to a captain, and they assign him a ship. The idea that would immediately mean the same crew and everything, Spock maintains his rank, but he would be acting as his first officer and all that stuff, I don't really think that would be the case. Giving Kirk a command, okay, which is what he always wanted after all this, and so he's got it and all that. The other thing that's a little bit bothersome, and even though it's just a better looking ship, but they give him a new Enterprise, and of course it doesn't look any different. It's the same. They just changed the little the numbers with the -A on it, but I would have thought they just renamed the Excelsior Enterprise. It's not as pretty a ship, but it is the new model that they were going. I suppose they could have done some other design, but the idea that they were going to build an old style ship, because they'd already established in Search for Spock that the ship was old. It was being used to train cadets, and that was about it. It was on its way out, and after it was so badly damaged in the battle with Khan, when they go home, Kirk's told, yeah, we're not going to refit the Enterprise. We're going to junk it. Its day is done. And with the Excelsior being the new line of ships, which is later established with the Next Generation series, you see they're all old in that era. They're the old ships, but you still see some of them around. But that was the new line of ships that they had. I'm sure they did some little aesthetic changes here and there and stuff like that. But nevertheless, that's where they were going. So it would have made more sense that they had that ship and they took off in and all of that. But really, at this point in their lives, they would all still be doing their same old jobs that they did when they were young. It's kind of a waste of experience and talent that they could be used elsewhere. And some of them certainly, and they eventually get there with Sulu. He gets command of the Excelsior, stuff like that. But certainly Sulu and Chekhov probably would have had their own commands and that sort of thing. And McCoy, I mean, he would probably be the first one who's like, I'm retired. I've had enough. But, they wanted to keep it going. It was fun. Everybody loved these characters and all that. But the end was coming soon. It can only go so far. But this might have been a better one to do, to say, well, they flew off into the sunset. But they felt they had a few more in them, and that's what they did. So, voyage home, they go home, and then immediately hop in a ship and go back out into the unknown. But, well, it's what they do, you know. So there you go. Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home.